kind of who's in the room in terms of your focus. So first, let me get a raise of hands for those of you primarily focused around video solutions. All right. How about photography? There's been a mix there. On the video side, how many of you work for companies smaller than 10 people? And, okay, so some post houses. Okay, so we got quite a mix. You know, what I find common about the creative community is that this audience here is probably the most technical group we tend to get, you know, because we're all having to learn kind of the latest technologies in order to kind of be, you know, investing wisely on what we're doing around the storage, what we're doing around the graphics and whatnot. And we're really kind of at this, I'd say, another turning point here where if we're sort of looking forward, you know, it's a very radical design difference when Apple announced the Mac Pro, and I'm sure it both shocked and delighted because you're wondering, okay, how do I fit in with all of my existing parts and pieces that, you know, kind of fit in the big box, and now Apple's gone to this kind of smaller design with everything being a peripheral to that. And, you know, we've seen historically through Apple's decisions that oftentimes we're very forward-looking into kind of, you know, early adopters of the USB port and FireWire and whatnot. And Apple's done the same with Thunderbolt. And we're seeing, you know, a lot of the vendors here highlighting some of the benefits and their latest products around Thunderbolt. And, you know, it was interesting. Did any of you go to CES this year? So it's interesting talking to Sonny because Sonny went, and you know, he said it was really pretty interesting to see that the show had such a heavy influence around 4K displays and highlighting the compatibility to Macs, where you know, typically that's going to be a real mixed Windows Mac environment because, you know, with the Mac Pro really supporting 4K displays, you can almost sense this adoption of Ultra HD is going to go so much faster than the adoption of HD. And you know, I tend to lean more on the photography side than video, so I've been just salivating over 4K setup for, you know, doing all of the DSLR work that I like to just have almost the full image on a single screen. So part of what I really wanted to do today is not so much kind of get bogged down into just presenting speeds and feeds, because I tend to think this audience really is pretty savvy on and probably have done that. So I somewhat want to make it interactive, but I do want to highlight on a few things to just kind of give us a baseline comfort level with some of the changes. And I'm actually just going to use a couple of points on the website to highlight and at least have a point of reference when we're talking on the display. Of course, you know, the new design of the Mac Pro, you know, it's only 9 inches tall. It's a single core cooling. So where there was a number of fans before in the old Mac Pro, this core design actually allows for a single fan and puts this at a much lower sound level too. So this is actually the same sound that you would get out of a Mac Mini. So for those who really, you know, are in more like, especially in like an audio sort of setup, that ability to have an extremely quiet computer. And while the old Mac Pro, you know, if you started to add cards and things, those 9 fans were running more frequently. You could really, the noise could be an impact to what you were trying to do. And all of a sudden, we've got this very quiet system that if you need that, you know, killer Pegasus 2 RAID sitting connected to it, that thing could be, you know, 10, 20, 30 feet away, still connected across that Thunderbolt cable. So you have, you know, with sort of the change of everything not being in the box, you also reap some benefits as we look forward. So, and sort of the look forward is definitely moving toward, you know, Ultra HD, 4K in the photo world, and, you know, the kind of the next generation of performance drives taking advantage of Thunderbolt 2. And so just kind of pausing there on the Thunderbolt. If I scroll down here, actually, I'll just slide through here. We'll just look briefly on this. So on the processor front, what is driving me crazy about Intel is they don't always distinguish names and branding real well. And so, like from the latest generation of like MacBook Pros, you look at the specs and it's still saying Intel. It seems like the same thing, and you're going, wow, you didn't do anything different. Well, they went to a Haswell chip, right? And then suddenly that's a much higher performance, but when you look at it just on the specs, it doesn't even say the Haswell chip. So it's getting more difficult to try to look at the processor and understand how do you do this sort of relatively, right? And I think all of us tend to start to rely on reports coming out of, performance things, whether it's a Bare Feeds or somebody kind of doing actual app comparisons, because not so easy like it was in years past to sort of look at specs of the processor and know what you're really getting out of it, right? So a key differentiator in the MacPro, which has been historically true, is that we're using their Intel's server class processors, right? So you have a more robust processor to begin with, and you're really having to decide, 4, 6, 8, 12 cores of what you want. That's kind of a key decision. So there's that sort of play of performance versus budget, because that's not a changeable item. There's been discussion around the processor itself is in a port that could be pulled out. And there's probably going to be people that would do that, not like they were doing that in the old Mac Pro. But I think for the majority of people, you really should be looking at what is the most performance you can get out of that box. And you're going to say, you want to obviously give longevity to the investment of devices that you have. And that's part of where you will look at, for those of you who have invested in things like Red Rocket, then suddenly having an external chassis makes sense. If you're buying a new editing station, then, the new AJA I/O box starts to make more sense of plugging on as a peripheral to this. So I know these challenges around, you've got your existing investment that you're trying to give longevity to. You're trying to look at the future, what you're going to need for the next several years. And so investing in higher performance on this core is something key to be looking at. So trying to get yourself up into that higher processor is always going to be a good thing. Memory, at least, is upgradable. So this is the one area where Apple does allow that to be changed. There are 4 slots in it. So whether you're using 2 all the way up to 16 gig today, and I believe the machine, Apple hasn't come out and talked about the 32s, but I think we'll see that. I'm not announcing that, but right now, you can configure this up to 64 gigs, and I could easily see that moving into 128 as memory sort of becomes available and compatibility there. So at least here, you can make an investment and know that, hey, if you did determine you need more memory. And as we all move to the creative apps being 64-bit and Mavericks and, software in general, just taking better advantage of more memory, this becomes kind of key, right? For those of you who've kind of invested in more memory in your older machines, you see that tremendous performance increase by doing that. So you definitely want to continue to be getting as much memory as you can possibly get. I think one of the bigger changes that's probably hitting the masses, there were some of you who made big investments in high-end graphics cards in the old Mac Pro. I think this kind of brings that idea to the masses, and it was the right time for Apple to do this in the hardware, because we see that the OS and applications are now being optimized to take advantage of that. So it's kind of like the perfect time where you can take advantage of GPUs, because so much of the software is quickly being changed to take advantage of that. And so it's not just about the processor, central processor anymore. It becomes very much, what are you doing? What applications are you using? Have those been optimized to take advantage of the GPUs? And if so, then getting yourself up into the higher end. So the defaults are the Radeon D300 and 500, and there's a D700 option as well. Those also, again, are not something that you would upgrade. So you're needing to make that decision from the get-go. And depending on what you're doing, this is obviously going to have a huge impact around rendering times and 3D modeling, so things that are very processor intensive for those applications to be updated. So, you're kind of seeing the buzz of performance around the applications that have been updated. And of course, there are a number of apps as well as utilities that haven't been yet. I won't speak to everybody's apps. I'm sure Dave will talk about what Adobe's plans. So Apple tends to highlight, our own apps. Final Cut has been optimized. Aperture has not yet. We're probably near that. No pre-announcements there. But that's where you see big performance gains on applications like Final Cut rendering because it's taking advantage of the GPUs. Any questions on that so far as I kind of roll through this? Happy to keep this interactive on things that some of you have been reading. So we started to touch on 4K displays. I sort of feel like the sense I got out of my discussion with Sonny was, hey, 2014 is definitely going to be the year of 4K displays. I believe he's selling the Sharp right now, and others will follow it. We see others like LG is, I think, announced at CES that they're going to make a Thunderbolt 4K display. So there's going to be quite a few of displays out there. It's going to give us lots of options to be looking at, even some down sub $1,000. So the price point of getting into 4K is going to rapidly drop. That's very exciting for all of us. And so this Thunderbolt, just to kind of make sure everybody's clear, Thunderbolt was actually created by Intel. It was like, when Apple adopted USB, you kind of thought, well, Apple was kind of on the first one to do first one to do USB. They thought Apple did USB, and the same thing goes with Thunderbolt. Well, Apple's been the first one to do it, so we created it. It actually isn't Intel standard. Apple's just the first one to adopt it. So the Mac Pro has Thunderbolt 2, and really the key differentiator from the Thunderbolt 1 to 2 is that in Thunderbolt 1, you do have 2 channels of 10 gigabit, but in Thunderbolt 2, those 2 can actually be paired. So that if you have something that can do the higher performance, like the Pegasus 2 from Promise, who will be showing this, that's where you really reap the benefit. Do we need Thunderbolt 2 for displays or scanners or cameras? No, because those aren't the high demand. Where we need the Thunderbolt 2 is maybe an expansion chassis that has a Red Rocket in it, or to a Pegasus 2 or something that's high performance. And so this compatibility to have multiple devices plugged into this, it's pretty fascinating that just through a single cable that you have the ability to run all these protocols. So that's why, on the Thunderbolt display, you get Ethernet on the display, you get FireWire on the display, you get USB 1, 2, 3, right? So you get all these capabilities because Thunderbolt itself can do multiple channels of different protocols all simultaneously. So it does create this, tremendous convenience for us. And when we think about Mac Pros having external devices, well, now suddenly you can make the investment in a Asia I/O or Pegasus 2 or something and quickly just move that to machine that's needing it. So I think there's going to be some benefit for where you're sort of in a cost-conscious area, but you have multiple stations that you could, in fact, determine certain kinds of equipment could move around. The Thunderbolt, the Mac Pro itself can support up to 6 displays or 3 4K displays. I think in most cases, as we look at where we want to be setting up for, say, an Ultra HD editing station, an ideal setup would be, Thunderbolt display and a 4K display. The thing with the 4K displays is, the menu gets really small. So to make that your primary display, you definitely have to have better eyes than I do. So we're really seeing that, the ideal setup is to have your 4K display either as your, Ultra HD monitor or 4K kind of display for doing just the viewing of the content, and let your Thunderbolt display be your primary display for like the menus and things like that. So storage-wise, Apple's got the flash drives from 256 to 1 terabyte. So again, we know that you're going to have your core OS and applications here, and all of your content is going to reside on those external drives. And we're seeing quite a few manufacturers now, out there highlighting the fact that they're supporting Thunderbolt. Promises kind of at the top end of really doing it at a very high performance level, and but you will see that there's quite a few vendors that have adopted the Thunderbolt interactivity. So just kind of looking on the back of MacPro, for those that haven't really seen it, you have the 4 USB 3 ports. Those are downward compatible. So if you have older devices that are USB 1 or 2, those are compatible there. As we mentioned, the 6 Thunderbolt 2 ports, dual gig Ethernet. The dual gig Ethernet, we actually continue to find that quite a few of our creative accounts want to be able to tie into an XAN. And so that was a key reason to make sure we had 2 Ethernet ports. And so, in fact, and from a low cost, setting up a new SAN solution, Sunny's been really putting together a very cost-effective way of setting up an XAN just using Mac Minis as the controllers. Incredibly low cost because the client, which you recall, XAN client used to be $1,000 per system. All of a sudden, that rolled right into the OS. So it becomes a very low-cost way of setting up a SAN. And you can actually do that with Thunderbolt if you've got a existing network that you want to use the 10 gigabit fiber channel, you can do that. And so give some flexibility for kind of tying in old or a low-cost way of getting in a new XAN, as opposed to a single station setup where you might want to do like a Pegasus 2. So a fair number of options there for you in terms of talking about storage expansion. So wanted to touch on 802.11 AC wireless and Bluetooth 4. So the latest iteration of both of these. For those of you not really keeping up on the wireless side, I think the big differentiator of AC that's going to impact us all is if you have your wireless routers that are supporting AC, they can handle multiple of the speeds. So the challenge that even if in your home, if you had a 802.11n time capsule that was your home wireless kind of net, if somebody walked in with a 802.11g device, the entire network comes down to the lowest common denominator. So when you're in a home or office where you've got a mixed environment of people having old and new technology, the new guys suffer because anybody comes in with the old brings everybody down. And so for the first time with AC, it can actually have that in parallel. So you can have these new high-performance AC people. Somebody can still walk in with even an old AB, and it'll give the AB people their speed or G or N their speed, but the people who have the newer devices that support AC would get that performance. Right? So it does mean that you're going to look at what is your wireless infrastructure, where you need that high performance, and look for newer routers that support that. Just at sort of the home level, the latest time capsule and airports from Apple do support AC. And I know Sunny's kind of keen on like the AeroHive bang for the buck. Those things are pretty amazing and do a great job of managing multiple paths of different performance. So if you are needing to look at your wireless infrastructure, definitely sit down with folks at MBS to kind of discuss some options of what's the lowest cost way for you to get to kind of raise that. Because as we start to do more things across the wireless, then we need that performance. And sort of the home environment, with Mavericks now supporting a virtual display across an Apple TV. I don't know if some of you have done this. I find this just incredibly helpful for when I have family over and I want to show them, but I actually want the full capabilities of the Mac menu. You can take, HD TV that's sitting somewhere with an Apple TV on it and have your MacBook Pro redirect as a second display wirelessly across that Apple TV now. So that was an addition with Mavericks, and as well as having menus on any display that's connected. So if we have, 3 displays connected, no longer are you having to look back on just the one to get the menu. You get the menu wherever you need it, including a TV, HD TV, or device connected through an Apple TV. So it's pretty handy if you haven't done that. A number of you probably, how many people have Apple TVs? Yeah, so quite a few probably have them and may not have even tried that. So it's something to actually go home and give that a try. So let me unfortunately, my performance slides won't be able to get over there to you. So let me just talk a little bit to this while I have them up here on my computer. So from a Final Cut performance, and Abba will actually be doing some demo and talk about things. I don't know if he'll talk more about the performance, but just because of the GPUs combined with the processors in Final Cut performance, like color correction is over 4 times as fast. And things like picture-in-a-picture are 4 times as fast. A 4K render is almost 3 times as fast. Multicam angles, 2.7, and optical flow retrimming is 2 and 2.6 times faster.
Do cards support 3D processing?
So the I know Mavericks has been updated to improve the actually on the CUDA, I'm not sure. I'll have to double check. Is this in here? OpenGL and OpenCL were updated, and so software that's utilizing those is going to reap some benefits. In terms of the CUDA, I'm not sure about that. I'll have to follow up on that. Yes.
You said that things are like 2 and 3 times faster. But what specs is the MacPro using, and what is it faster than?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So when you see the performance, I think I can get to the ones on the Apple site. Chart. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Stop here, 3D applications. So this is based on taking a 12-core MacPro, the previous generation. So it's a really good question because it is interesting when I go up to like Barrett Thomson and others that are doing performance, oftentimes they're taking very hot-rodded MacPro. So it is kind of more challenging to go, hey, if you've invested in higher end, the Sony 900 series, AMD graphics cards, you could have a couple of those in an old Mac Pro, and then suddenly you do have software taking advantage of those GPUs. You just may not have the bus speed quite as fast as the new Mac Pro. So depending, again, that's why I try to position this as bringing multiple GPU processing to the masses. If some of you have made an investment in an old one, certainly the difference isn't as great. So the performance differences that you see on Apple's site are just taking a out-of-the-box new MacPro, out-of-the-box old MacPro, both being 12 core? That's a good question. Certainly understanding that. It all comes back to that, you got to evaluate the bang for the buck of what you're doing and where you're investing. And we know that's true. If you've got a whole new editing station that you're going toward Ultra HD, you don't have any legacy stuff, you're in a very different position than you've got a big investment in older equipment. You're trying to figure out what can you kind of move forward versus, and that's a big part of what we're trying to help you with today is, where are you and what are you focused on? What are your goals or what are your budgets? So it's really tough to kind of do this as just kind of one big wham bam thing here. Yes.
I know the activity monitor in the Mac lets you see the CPU activity. Is there anything that does that for the GPU so you can kind of see how hard different applications are using it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if you didn't hear is there a way of actually seeing the utilization of both? Now I'll put it together as both a processor as well as GPU, sort of an overall performance. That's a good question. I'll ask one of our engineers that. I'm not aware right off the top of my head. I've seen like utilities that just show, okay, here's GPU processor, here's the core processor, but it would be nice to kind of know, hey, overall specific to something that's rendering or something, how is that impacted?
How aggressively is Apple working with third parties to support multi-core processing?
Yeah, so the question is around it, how aggressively is Apple working with like the software vendors to optimize their software, take advantage of GPU. Apple has our developer community, and there's thousands of people in that. We try to get the masses of information through that mechanism for everybody to have access to it. I would say Apple tends to really have a very closer relationship with the top 100 software developers. So certainly companies like the Adobe's and Microsoft's and the Quarks and whatnot. Those guys would be being reached out to proactively to adopt the latest technology.
3D?
Both as well as 3D. Yeah. If there's specific ones, I tend to try to go back to, if we're looking for a certain app and you're waiting for that app before you're buying, oftentimes I'll go back and find who is the developer relations rep for that account. So I kind of compare notes of, hey, what's the account telling me? What's the developer relations person telling me? Try to get some guidance on a time frame of when they're going to be releasing. Apple's not going to disclose something from a third party, so that's why I say, well, let Dave Helmley talk about the Adobe products while he's here versus having Apple talk about somebody else's product. But it's a really good point because that's what we need is those software. That's why it could be tricky when you're making a comparison now of, hey, is this the time to be investing in a new system? If you're using software that's not utilizing those GPUs, that may be tougher for you to say, hey, does this make as much sense right now from comparing old to new? So, but that's why I say if you are investing, then you want to be sort of forward-looking as opposed to how can we hot rod your existing system. This is kind of the future, right? So, that's why I say Apple's kind of done that historically to where oftentimes we make maybe a little bit of some pain points of kind of forcing the vendors to have a very look-forward approach to that as well. Yes, sir.
Going back to the graphic on the displays, it said 3 4Ks or 6 1080p monitors. Is that what I understood? Or can you have 3 4Ks and 3 other monitors that are lower def?
Yes, you can have a mix. If you were to do 3 4K displays, what you would do outside, that one I'd have to check on. Because I think what I'm seeing is people are either doing like a 1 4K and multiple monitors. That's a kind of a typical setup. I haven't seen anybody say they want 3 4Ks and something else. I have seen where, you can think, well, 6 displays, it's for a video wall. It's pretty handy to know that, hey, you could drive a video wall of 6 displays off of a single MacPro.
Does it usually come out like one Thunderbolt and you're feeding all the monitors through one Thunderbolt port and stringing them along?
So for 6, it's a good point because you're going to utilize all of those ports. So if we kind of come up, let's see where we've had the tech specs where it listed So you have the 6 Thunderbolt displays, depending on, are you driving HDMI or whatnot. So I actually got our product manager to send me a list of, if you are driving 6 displays, give me the specifics of what adapters and things that you do to drive HDMI or DVI or DVA or whatnot. So if you're actually needing to do that, I'll say, ping me after. I'll make sure I get that information over to you.
Can you describe the display through USB 3? Can it handle? I mean, is that possible or not?
Oh, a display through you? I'm not. The product manager did not say anything about driving a display through USB. So it's a good point. If you were trying to drive more, some of it might be. I won't try to speculate here, but it's a good question. I'll have to check on that. Yes.
What does the HDMI 1.4 mean? Now, I've got an iMac in a planetarium right now, and it's hooked up to an Epson projector that goes onto the dome. I've also got a Vizio 3D large monitor in the center at eye level. I'm trying to drive 3 displays, and of course, they're not all identical, unfortunately, on the legacy iMac.
Yeah, it's less of an issue. So the question is around the HDMI 1.4. Where does that come into play? I guess is a way of simplifying that. For your legacy items that you have the HDMI on, the 1.4 is really not impacting there. If you move to an Ultra HD TV, those need the HDMI 1.4 to drive that. So you would need, HDMI cable compatible to HDMI 1.4 to make sure that when you plug that new Ultra HD TV into this.
So for the sharp 32-inch Ultra HD LED monitor, you need something like this, right?
Right.
Okay.
And that's why at CES, all those companies that were highlighting Ultra HD TVs and 4K displays, all were doing it with MacPros.
Sure.
Yeah, because that's, the one box out there that is supporting it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, Apple is definitely an early adopter, but just with the plethora of companies announcing sub $1,000 4K displays at CES, Sonny and I both agreed, boy, this is going to be the year of Ultra HD. Where you think about, it took, a decade to get us to HD when we started talking about it. I think us moving, and for those of you who, made that investment in things like Red and things that were doing 4K, you're sitting sweet because you're going, hey, cool, I'm ready for the next wave. I can finally start delivering this to more people. So for me, didn't have the investment there. I think this brings that higher quality more to the masses, and of course, as the broadcast industry then is supporting Ultra HD, we got an easier delivery mechanism.
So on the issue of red rockets and expansion chassis, would there be a speed throttle to Thunderbolt comparatively to like PCI X16?
It's a good question on those who have red rockets in an expansion chassis. Is there a performance degradation versus the old PCI? My understanding is no. I would want to kind of verify that with one of our engineers that's done red rocket testing. So, like I said, my high-level understanding, no, but I can certainly double check with that. And in fact, Chris or Sonny may have done that here. So, hey, Chris?
Sure.
Question came up that you might know on putting a red rocket in an external chassis. Is there a performance degradation versus having red rocket in directly on the PCI bus in an old MacPro?
I can only imagine it's going to be severe. As a matter of fact, I don't have any personal experience with it, but you definitely don't have all the lanes on your device here on Thunderbolt. So there's definitely going to be some sort of a performance degradation. If you look at it from a graphics card perspective, which I know a little bit about, and all the graphics cards are not supposed to run in Thunderbolt chassis right now. If you do manage to do that, you can get acceptable performance, but you can't saturate the device with the amount of data that you can get through that. So it's kind of an answer, non-answer for you. When Dave gets up here, he has a lot more experience with the red rocket, and I think he even has it experience with the Red Rocket in an external chassis, you can probably speak to that.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, Dave Hellman here from Adobe will have a test on that. Great. Good. Thanks. All right.
Can you speak a little bit about the limitation of the main drive to 256 gigs flash drive? Why did they bring the main drive so small?
Well, remember that's a 256 to 1 terabyte. So we do see, part of the goal of having a small design, the flash makes sense and actually is a higher performance than a spinning drive, right? So you're not giving up performance, and they felt like in the scenario where people do want their core applications and OS on the internal, and your projects are going to be on high performance grades anyway, then suddenly this starts to make sense. So certainly having 1 terabyte of internal is ample. I've had a scenario where people told me, hey, my core applications and OS need more than a terabyte.
You just have to be more comfortable with using external storage. The nice thing about the old Mac Pro is that you can throw everything into one box. But one of the bad things is you have everything in that one box. And you're limited by the power supplies, by the cooling, et cetera, et cetera. Having these items in an external chassis makes things a little bit easier to do upgrades.
Yeah,
And
like I
Apple
said,
itself assigns photos and movies and music to the main drive.
Right,
You have to alias
right.
it.
Not an issue, not an issue. If you know how to set up your account, you can have your account on an external drive, and then it's not an issue.
But there are many applications that simply dump the data on the main drive when they reach the limits of the RAM. Including After Effects is doing that.
You can set up your scratch disks to be just about any place you want to on most applications.
We know that.
Yeah, I think that could be just
That's
making
just
sure
about-
on the applications that you're using, even things like whether it's even iTunes or iPhoto or Aperture, things like that, just understanding how do you point those libraries to an external.
How about the reliability of the flash drive compared with the magnetic drives? Do you have any data? Are they really more reliable? Why did they limit us to the flash boot drive?
Well, I'm not sure exactly, other than I know from just a design performance perspective, we reap the benefit of flash. Early reports that I'm seeing are saying, longevity, there's certainly measurable time, which seems to be longer than spinning drives. At no point would I say, you need to have a backup of your content, so it's not like we're advising that. Nothing's changed there from making sure you've got a backup of everything.
Can the flash drive be replaced?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a good question up here. Can the flash drive be replaced? It's as a service thing, so MBS could do that for you. That is not a self replacement project. Yes.
I don't know if Joe changed this, but I know in Photoshop, CS for the last few years, if you used it you used something as an external drive, which I was used to, the file would corrupt. And it was even Lynda.com talked about it. Don't do that. So unless Adobe's really changed that, it was a pretty big issue.
Yeah, all that usually, but when there's a newer technology, they run into an issue. That's usually the kind of thing that gets resolved with newer iterations. So, we're on about third or fourth generation of flash drive technology. I'll let Adobe talk to. I doubt that's still an issue.
I think you didn't kind of mention it, but you could get up to a terabyte of internal storage. It's just that would be very expensive, so you didn't make that the default configuration.
Oh yeah, from a price,
So
yes.
if
That's
somebody
why
says I gotta have a lot of space inside. As long as you don't mind paying for it, you can do that.
right, and and no doubt the swing from the lowest level Mac Pro to adding more memory, higher processor, multiple high-end GPUs. This machine has a bigger range than we've seen. Certainly in the last generation, but that's just part of, you just look at the cost of, the Intel and the high-end. In fact, really, I was looking this morning at the cost comparison of putting in high-end dual AMD video GPUs into an old Mac Pro. It's cheaper. It has gotten cheaper to do it now. So I do feel like Apple's brought high-end GPU performance to the masses here.
Just curious, do the solid state drives have cache on them, or is it just one chunk of memory? You know, as opposed to, you know, a spinning hard drive might have 16 megs of onboard cache.
You know, and I remember reading a little about that. I believe they do, but let me double check on that.
I can answer that a little bit.
Okay.
Richard can promise. Spinning disk drive has got physics limits the speed that you can get the data from the I/O port on it to the heads of the ladder. So what they do is put a cache in there as a buffer. SSD is so fast you don't need a buffer. So if you're just writing it straight in and out, that's it.
Okay.
So no waiting.
I know we got started late. I want to give time to the next presenter because we're here, all of us vendors, we're all here all day. So feel free to grab us as needed. Like I said, if there's something I can answer, I'm doing a call in to one of our other engineers and get answers for you. So don't leave the day without, you know, getting the answers that you need on things. Thank you very much.
Thank you.